Hello and welcome. I'm so pleased you could be with us tonight because I have a wonderful guest. Dudley Riggs is back, the one and the only Dudley Riggs. I think most of you who have lived in Minnesota or the Midwest know about Dudley. He grew up, as many of you know, as a circus child. His parents were in the circus. He was in the circus until he was in his 20s. And then he made a big switch and eventually ended up in comedy and is considered the founder of improv theater. We have so many things to talk about tonight, but we're going to try to talk some about his early circus days. It's kind of a part two to an interview I did with him about 5 years ago now on his history there. And then we're going to talk how he made the move from the circus and vaudeville into comedy and producing and directing and satire. So there are some really interesting parallels that we'll explore that he can share. And with that, welcome. It's so good to see you.
Thank you.
Great to
Very nice
Great to have you back. And you have a new book that we will be showing people too that is fascinating. I spent the weekend reading it, and it's called, folks, Flying Funny, which is a great title. Did you come up with the title, or did the publisher? Or?
No, actually, I think the original title that I was going to use was "Oops!" Exclamation point! Oops! And then under that, a little cut line which would say, "In the realm of professional aerial flying, there is no such word as oops."
You don't want to hear an oops, do you?
Anyway, no, Flying Funny has been the working title for a while, but it's also entitled, it's Flying Funny, and then My Life Without a Net.
Yes.
And that's...
And right there we have a parallel with comedy and satire, don't we? So, without a net.
And you know, we've talked about improvisational comedy over the years as being theater without a net. Essentially, that all started with my efforts to do theater without a script. The whole thought from early on was that if you had a group of people together who trust each other well, they should be able to create entertainment without the benefit of the script. They would create the material as they perform it. And that was sort of a goal started back when I was in college. So. And
that was a pretty revolutionary idea when you brought it to your folks you were working with, the actors, and they were not probably real eager to try this at first, right?
No, there was a good deal of resistance to improvisation. Generally, people, when I started saying we're going to use free association, the term free association frightened people. They thought, well, we couldn't possibly. An actress said, well, what if I say the wrong word? And the whole point is that there are no wrong words.
Right.
You're going to be telling, your words will be the right words because they're your words. And having people confident in working with each other and relaxed enough to be able to make a mistake, they can eventually be able to create the dialogue between people without benefit of script.
But as you say, you need to trust each other and trust yourself, don't you?
No.
Have the self-confidence that would make it okay to do it that way.
Right, and it's the whole. It's very difficult to have a group of people who do not interrupt each other. The normal American pattern of conversation is someone's interrupting someone else. When you try to build the conversation without interrupting, you have to be able to trust what the other person is saying and have to listen to it very carefully.
And that's a big secret, isn't it?
Yes, and I think, you know, it's a difficult thing to say that, you know, you have to realize that a comma might replace the don't you know or you know phrases, or and so a lot of it is in getting the atmosphere and the circumstance where people do trust each other enough to be able to do this kind of work.
I want to go back a bit, and quite a bit, and talk some about your early days, and then hopefully we can bridge the transition days too, because you struggled a lot with whether to stay as a circus performer or go into comedy. And to sort of set the stage with your circus work, I mean, you started, your family was a circus family for 4 or 5 generations.
Sure.
5?
Four,
Was
yeah.
it 4? Coming from England. And
yeah.
your mom and dad had an act that was
They were aerialists
important.
and worked what was referred to as a double trapeze. They worked at a very elevated height in the circus. They were
Often center stage, right?
over
Or
the
center ring.
and they were given center ring spot and high billing, and they were given high pay for a number of years, and they were doing this rather romantic pas de deux at great height, and
without a net, right?
without a net, yes.
Which
And so
is scary.
And that sort of laid the groundwork for the other work that the family would do. We had, because of the necessity of working year-round, we would also were performing in vaudeville during the off-season. So the circus would be from April until November, and then the winter season would start in the vaudeville theaters. And so you had to be able to do both.
Be nimble on your feet and body and mind. As a little tiny boy, you were in the circus when you were still in diapers, the Polar Prince.
Oh, yes.
And we talked about that in an earlier interview, which you can perhaps access via YouTube. But I was struck too by how when you were 5, you were doing song and dance things in vaudeville. Mm-hmm. And then at 10 or 9 or 10, Dudley, you were actually standing under your parents who were doing the trapeze
That's
act,
right.
and kind of acting as a spotter, we might call it now, or a stand, you called it.
Okay, yes, we refer to that as standing the act, and it's a term that is used a lot in the circus. If you have 2 or 3 people who are actively performing the feat, but frequently you'll have someone else standing the act, which really means you're standing close and observing, but you're not necessarily involved in the performance.
And I think you made the comment once, and perhaps there was some just showmanship there, that the audience would say, "Look at that young child, he's there underneath them," and
well,
rather sympathetic.
That put me in the situation of seeing my parents risk their lives
Yes.
directly overhead, twice a day. With
That's
circus.
what
And
it's so interesting for me to think of the feelings you must have had as a young boy, as you say, watching them put their lives at risk.
Yeah. And they were very.
Did it make you anxious, do you think?
I may have been slow on the uptake there, but I clearly had a duty, a job, and I was the 3rd member of the company, the 3rd member.
And then
of the
you
act.
started doing some trapeze work yourself when you were
Yes.
about 10 only.
Yeah.
So
I started flying at 10, and I flew, developed over several years, but I managed to make a point that I think probably at about 16 or 17, I was really beginning to feel feel the mustard, as they say, feel the strength. It was a period, sort of extraordinary pleasure that comes from being able to fly. I mean, flying is, there's really no substitute for it. And, you know, the little moment of time when you are without gravity, and at the same time depending on gravity. And so
it's something that most of us maybe have dreams of flying. I think it's a common dream for some people. I know I've had those dreams, but to actually be doing it and not to be afraid. I mean, it sounds like you were not nervous as you went up the ladder and put the rosin on your hands.
It became, you know, the concept of, you know, what's the moment before you fly is, you know, someone might be saying to themselves, "Oh, can I do this?" We always took a different point. We just say, "Watch this."
Look at me.
Sure.
Watch me fly.
And that's a good feeling. And you know, getting the applause is wonderful, but being able to do something that other people don't do, and you know, when I would train people for flying and for aerial work, I used to always talk to them about the idea of gravity is your friend. It's very reliable, always there.
You can count on gravity doing its part.
And it becomes important to use that tool. It's you know, they used to say, well, people are fearful of falling. And they say even a baby is fearful of falling. And I always say that's not the case. The baby is fearful of losing support. But if the baby is confident of the support, then
that's an interesting differentiation.
They do not develop the fear. So we just say we have to, we're not overcoming fear, we're keeping the fear, but we're also managing it. And the job is, you know, we supply thrills to the audience, and so that's the work.
So if it's not dangerous, the audience isn't getting what they maybe came for, right?
That's true, yes.
You told a story in the book, too, that was almost shocking to me, of your father during the World's Fair of 1939, going to the top of the Empire State Building and balancing somehow up there. And you said at that point you did feel, what if he would fall?
Yes, there's some nervousness involved with, I think my mother, who tended to be pretty strong and not fearful. She got fearful on that event, but this was a advertising promotion for the fair, and the idea was to be able to get a newsreel photo or get some photos of someone standing on their hands at an elevated height, and essentially he did what was a chair handstand, where you use a chair to support, and he'd been doing that for years.
But not that high.
No.
Right.
So
danger.
But that was back in a period, you know, just before World War II. One of the ways of advertising was to create some kind of oddity, someone dancing on the roof of the Empire State Building, as well as
and that
other little things which would emphasize some some unique talent here performing.
And your father knew the value of advertising and PR, didn't he?
Yes.
And that's probably something that you gleaned and took with you too when you moved into producing and directing.
I suppose, yes. And the whole difference between what I was doing before, the circus and the vaudeville, was for the most part visual. I mean, we were doing pantomime, we were performing, but not doing dialogue, performing.
Right.
Juggling is a silent act for the most part.
Right.
And so I wanted to get away from being a silent act and getting into what they call talk acts. And so
More cerebral too,
right,
obviously.
that allows us, allowed us to actually express ideas, and to do that. We thought that for a while that the place to do that was in nightclubs. Nightclubs were sort of picking up in the 50s, and people were putting together a stage show with a big band and hiring maybe 6 or 8 acts that would come in, variety acts. And so we were doing that. So we thought we would like to make the move from sight act to talk act, and agents treated it that way. You're either doing a side act or a talk act. So,
and the evolution was gradual. I mean, you started out in New York with the Instant Theater and some really wonderful people to work with, but eventually got back here to Minnesota, to Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And we benefited. We really benefited.
I put together a tour. We went out and played 7 colleges with the idea of testing the market and everything. But the whole thing is we didn't know what we were doing for the most part. So we performed in these colleges that were not yet, the classes hadn't begun yet. So we had a sort of a mix of audience. But the tour ended up in Minneapolis, and I decided that I better stay put for a while because I needed to finish school.
And you had just gotten married to a woman named Ruth.
Yeah.
And you also wrote in the book that you discovered that college kids were a really prime audience for satire and the kind of comedy that you were intrigued with, right?
Yeah. The circus comedy, which is always big, slapstick.
Right. Physical.
Yeah. The circuses didn't impress college students very much. And we thought if we get into ideas, we get into what they are thinking about, and if we can take their issues and project that into a sketch, that became the sort of I would say the template for everything that I would do after that.
And you started, I think we would say you started small, Stefani's
sure.
Pizza, where you had the midnight review or midnight show.
Well, at the time I arrived in Minneapolis to try to settle here, the city was rather conservative, and I would say there's nothing to do after 10 at night.
And that's pretty literally true, wasn't it?
Yeah. When the news signed off, that was sort of the end of the day. And so I thought, well, maybe we should have performances at midnight. And it was not encouraged by the city fathers. They didn't think that was a good idea. But we continued to do nighttime entertainment, and figured that the number of people who were still up at night would be our market and our audience. And part of that beginning.
You had some principles that are still Brave New Workshop principles now. Tell the truth, be honest about everything, take some risks.
Right.
What were some of the other principles?
Well, I think the originally when we were touring, when my father and I were touring together as brothers.
Riggs and Riggs, right?
Yes. When we were touring, we get together with other performers after an event and sit down and say, what does this town need? Mm-hmm. Every little town we were in, we'd say, well, what does this town need? And it was a very arrogant kind of thing to do. But it would come up, people would say, well, Tulsa, Oklahoma needs an opera company, or San Francisco needs bread that is not sourdough, or New Orleans needs coffee that doesn't have chicory in it. All these things of this sort. But when we came around to what does Minneapolis need, I said, well, it needs good bread and European coffee and satire.
And so you delivered on all three of those, right?
I did. Yeah. But the idea of European coffee when I came to town wasn't very. People did not take to that nicely. They were assuming that something was illegal about coming out of an
espresso machine. So. And you brought that machine from out on the East Coast, right?
Well, we actually brought it in from, we did a European tour, and it's one thing that I collected on that tour, which...
that's right, that was part of your reimbursement, right?
Yes, yeah. And that machine today is in the downtown Brave New Workshop, so...
And it used to be in the theater that was on a corner of Seven Corners, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing it there too.
Yeah. So it's sort of some kind of obelisk for people to connect.
Kind of a symbol, wasn't it? Or
now it was. I think in the early '50s, something like an espresso shop was kind of risque, and people were not sure that they wanted their daughter to go there, and it would be. It took a while for the audience to realize that the espresso coffee.
I mean,
had
think
merit.
of how long it's survived and thrived. Really, your theaters and evolved. The foreword to the book is written by Al Franken,
yes.
And he was one of your persons that you helped train, and of course we all know his history.
He came in as part of a summer program, which we, at the time, we called that the under subcommittee. I'm not sure why we gave it that name, but anyway, a lot of very talented kids showed up in that group, and they've gone on successfully in many other fields.
A lot of big name people, Pat Proft, Jim Belushi.
Yep.
What year was that approximately?
Oh, it would have been very late 60s, early 70s.
Okay.
And in the early 70s, we began to go on touring again in colleges, and so that tended to broaden our whole base. We began to do much more. We opened the other theater and added more payroll and added more offering, so we could have performances in 2 locations.
Right.
And,
so Brave New Workshop and the Dudley Riggs Espresso Theater.
Yeah, it's the ETC Theater.
I'm getting the signal, Dudley, already that we want to give people some information about how to get your book.
Oh.
So we don't want to skip that.
Okay.
But look at your screen to get information on how to find Flying Funny. It's going to be all over So you'll be able to easily access it, I think. Well, this time has gone way too fast. I had asked Dudley earlier if you would read just a paragraph from the very epilogue of the book. And do you have that handy?
I do.
The book, by the way, Dudley, I thought was so well written. And you're going to love it if you can track it down.
Well, I have to say, I was writing the book seemed like it forever. And in the period of time it took me to write the book, my wife published 3 books. So it was a little, I was a little bit blot for a while, but in any event, the last phrase in the book is, which I have torn from the manuscript. I'm saying, this is primarily related to the idea of the fun I get out of going to the top of buildings and the top of wherever I am, and I rather
Looking
like that.
down, yes,
So,
okay.
See, the point is that someone asked the question, why do you like to go high? And I guess I just hunger for things that are higher up, high things. I guess I hunger for the top of things, not the competitive, award-winning trophy top of things, but the sheer fun and ebullience of being up there where people fear to tread. I try not to scare people by standing too close to the edge. I try to avoid reminding them that there are some sensations that they will never ever feel. In these high up, quiet moments, I hear the circus music in my mind's ear, and I feel the warmth and arousal of muscle memory just from pushing gently on the barrier. The exhilaration, the assurance, the feel of flying comes back. And I know that if I were offered a booking, I could still do the act.
I love that. I love that. It's so poignant and so true. I mean, that feeling never leaves one, it sounds like.
No.
The thrill of it. And you certainly were flying both through all your years in the circus and then as a satirist and a producer. So thank you so much for coming down and joining me again. I want 10 times this much time. It went way too fast, but thank you, thank you.
Well,
I will be back next week without Dudley, unfortunately, but have a good week and check out his book. You'll love it. Bye-bye.